My name is Cheryl Erikson, and I'm the Indigenous focused ECE instructor with Louis Riel Vocational College. Today in guidance, we will look at Chapter 2 and physical emotional development that affects children's behaviors. But before we get started, just a reminder to read Chapter 2. This video is not a replacement for your chapter readings. So when we look at development and physical development on affecting behaviors, there's a lot of different, I think, things in early childhood that do affect behavior, not only physical development, but we'll talk a little bit about emotional development. And in particular, perhaps the stage of development that the child is in that affects their ability to understand and again, why they behave the way they do. So physical development is really important to the education process as well. Large muscle movement affects development in all domains, and if you think back to what we've learned so far about children's development, the larger muscles develop before the smaller muscles. So we gain strength in our arms and our hands before we do our fingers. So meaning our fingers and what we do with our fingers and touching and manipulating is our fine motor development. As well as health factors. So children who do get proper nutrition and eat well and also sleep well are less likely to behave. So usually children, when they eat and sleep, they're at their best, and when you're at your best, you're able to cope better with what's going on around you. It's when you're not at your best that challenging behaviors happen. So physical development, again, that small muscle coordination, it does take time to develop. And sometimes you see that as children, if you look at children from the ages of 2 onward to 5, a 2-year-old compared to a 5-year-old will have, the 5-year-old will have much more coordination and control over their body and be able to hold pen, be able to cut with scissors opposed to a 2-year-old. Their body is just really starting to gain more control over the larger limbs, their larger muscles. And so it can be really detrimental as well when you think about development if our expectations for children at the various ages are unrealistic. And so if we are, putting greater demands on them and they aren't ready developmentally, challenging, children will become feeling challenged and perhaps frustrated, and they're not going to be successful. You will see more behavioral issues that will come out of that. So we really need to gear our curriculum for the age of the child in order for that child to be successful. Studies have also shown that boys generally develop small muscle skills later than girls. Typically boys are more physical, and so they like the running, the jumping, the more physical activities using their larger muscles, opposed to small muscle development is usually those sit down, holding pens and paper. A lot of art, a lot of fine motor skills are gained in art activities, and boys tend to play more with blocks and construction than they do that small muscle, and so therefore their skills are developed later. Physical movement is also known to increase memory and help children to focus. So, that's one of the reasons why recess was implemented in school, is that it kind of resets the children. And so they have their time when they're in the class and they need to be focused, but studies have shown that focus is only, for an allotted period of time, maybe an hour. And then something physical has to happen with a child in order for them to get some of that energy out, reset, and then they're able to come back into that classroom and focus again. Studies have shown some children can average an hour and a half. So I think you really have to individualize your program and what you're doing. And again, this presentation is really more geared to the school environment and not the preschool environment. So keep in mind, in preschool, when we're doing our sit-down structure times, we're really limiting it to about 15 minutes. And we're doing some energy releasing before. So when the kids come to our activity, we're singing a song and doing some body movements to release energy. Then the children are able to sit down and focus on the activity, and then we transition on to something else. So our programming is really geared more to preschool, and knowing that physical release is important in order for them to focus. In school, going back to school, engaging specific children, you may have a child that is only able to sit down in a structured setting for maybe 30 minutes. And knowing that that child's limit is 30 minutes, it might mean after 30 minutes you say, go down the hall and get a drink of water. So they're getting up and they're moving around, which then will allow them to reset. So although we know studies show for the majority, it is really necessary to keep in mind that not all children fall within those parameters, and they may need an individualized plan to make them successful. Movement in the brain. So when we are moving our bodies, it stimulates that myelination in your brain, and that's where your neurons are creating those pathways. So it's stimulating brain function, and which that myelination process allows you to learn and understand. So connections are made, so to speak. It also increases blood flow and that cognitive process. So that's all working, getting your brain stimulated and your brain function moving so that you're able to retain that information that you're learning within that classroom. As well as it improves those executive functions as well. So you'll be able to process that information that you're being taught within that school environment. We do know that within stress does affect brain chemistry. And again, that's, as adults, you learn to control that in a positive way. We learn that stress can be good in some situations, and you learn to regulate and control that and be successful. But as young children, stress is hard when you don't have that self-control, or you haven't developed all your skills for self-regulation yet. So it can be a very emotional process, and stress can come out in different ways. That frustration can be shown through crying. It could be shown in a shutdown, not being able to focus on what's happening around you. And it could be something physical with that frustration, where you're really doing some type of physical outlet or hurtful type of behavior. So, depending on how you process that, it's unique again to everybody. Studies have shown that girls tend to be a little bit more verbal when it comes to how they're feeling, however, boys tend to have that more physical reactive process when it comes to how stress is related. As well as emotional development does affect that self-esteem. So children who are physically competent in balance, agility, coordination, speed, and power have higher self-esteem. And why that is because they're feeling good about themselves, right? And so when you feel good about yourself, you carry yourself a little bit differently. You've got a good again, self-concept. Children who don't have competence over those areas are lacking a little bit in self-esteem, and that could be shown in different ways as well. If you're not having a lot of self-esteem, you may not speak up for yourself as well when you're feeling emotional, and that's kind of where that shutdown sometimes takes place as well. And so some of the things that we've talked about are really focused in on Erikson's developmental stages. So we've talked about Erikson's social emotional development stage, and that is really key in why children behave the way they do. And so children do go through various stages of development, and those stages of development are really close to the ages of children. So for example, autonomy or trust versus mistrust is infancy, where children are learning if their needs are met, then the world is a safe place and they feel good. If their needs aren't met, they learn that the world is not good, it's not safe, and they don't develop the trust that they need to be successful. So we'll kind of look at a few of the different stages, and again, you know, it's not written in stone. Not all 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds are the same. We still need to consider developmentally appropriate curriculum as well. So this is just roughly the stages correlate to the age. So again, trust versus mistrust is that stage of development that focuses on infants. So birth roughly to 2 years of age, when they learn the world is a safe and friendly place when their needs are met. So food, nurturing, caring, loving environments. Without that trust, children don't develop that sense of safety and security. And they don't develop relationships, effective relationships. So trust and relationships work hand in hand. And with that, it affects their development, and it can affect how they behave in many different situations. So without trust, you're going to have more problems, basically. Erikson's stage of autonomy versus shame, so that toddler age, the 2-year-olds, basically. So it's an age where, you know, toddlers are learning to be independent, and they feel when they're making choices that are getting them in trouble, they feel that shame. Because of their actions. So, and that could be, you know, that's the learning process that comes from us as adults and how we're responding to them. It's also that age of no. So it's a negative type of age. We want them to become autonomous, and we do want them to gain confidence in their abilities. So they're really testing their limits. And again, we talk about the environment as well for positive outcomes. Children who are punished and stifled develop a feeling of shame as well. So that's that autonomy versus shame. So depending on that punishment, again, we want to focus on more the guidance and the discipline than the punishment, because of that whole piece in how it affects their self-esteem and self-concept. So basically, toddlers are very independent and they're exploring their environment. Us as adults, how we are guiding them is going to affect how they feel about themselves. Initiative versus guilt is roughly the 3 to 5 years of age. They're kind of back and forth, moving between that. They want that independence, they want that power, but feel guilty about making some mistakes. They want to be successful, and being able to initiate play at this stage is very important. So initiating play and learning how to play is going to be key for us as ECEs and how we teach children. So we need to give them the skills to enter play, which is often a big challenge with this age because they don't necessarily know how to do that. So a lot of our problem solving is going to be getting down to their level and teaching them and guiding them and giving them the words to enter in those play situations in a successful way. The final stage that Erikson actually has more than stage 5, but we're going to limit it to stage 5 because these are the parameters of ages we're working with as ECEs. And so stage 5, industry versus inferiority, is that school age stage as well. And so they're really extending their ideas of self through industry. They're learning to expand their ideas as successful workers, or learning to feel inferior and capable if they aren't successful in those endeavors. So this is a really a good stage for development as well, because we talk about experiences, right? And experiences is how we're learning and growing. So we want to make the experiences positive for school-age children as well, so that they're not repeating the same mistakes. So we don't want it to be too many failures resulting in negative feelings about themselves. We want to guide them in appropriate, effective ways, which will be conducive to their self-esteem and self-concept. We've also learned through just discussions in other courses and chapters regarding attachment. Secure attachments, again, are really key to success in developing those relationships with children in the preschool years. And again, I have to reiterate that those relationships that we're going to develop with children are really key in success as far as effective guidance techniques with children. So if we're not able to develop good relationships with children, is respect going to come? Are children going to be able to trust us? So we really have to be that secure attachment for the child and develop that relationship before we're going to be successful in guiding their behavior. So attachment, we know that there's a lot of issues with attachment, especially insecure attachment in the negative. We really need to focus on developing that secure attachment and those relationships with children to effectively problem solve. If children's needs are not met, misbehavior is likely to be the result. We briefly talked about that in chapter 1 when we look at the environment and why children behave the way they do. What are those needs? You know, depending on their age, they need that independence. They need to have that power and control of their body and the play situation that they're in. All children need attention, so we want to focus on the positives. Often we get children who do negative things to get attention, and that is a really hard cycle to break. So we want to limit the negativity or attention-seeking behaviors, or negative attention-seeking behaviors, and we want to focus on those positives as well, because those are more productive. And we also know that children need to be accepted, and so we need to guide, and we need to have really good relationships and talk and communicate to our children to meet those needs. And those are going to result in positive outcomes within your environment. Emotional regulation, what is this? We talk a lot about self-regulation. Self-regulation is a very emotional state. It's our ability, or in this case, children's abilities to control their internal reactions and their outward expressions of emotion. And so this is really key to having control over your body, so to speak. Children can't cope with emotions and moderate impulsive reactions, and so they really need to develop that self-control to understand those emotions and to be successful. So that's where it comes or where it's key to really be able to understand what those emotions are and put those emotions to words and label those feelings. That's really when you gain the control and you can express yourselves verbally and not be reactive. Reactive could be temper tantrums, crying, physical outlets. Those aren't productive to solving problems. Being able to control it, stop it before it's happening is productively controlling those emotions. Adults' responses to emotions is key. Again, you know, we're going to have to develop our skills in helping children. Receiving empathy, expressing empathy is really important. Do you really think that you're going to have a good sense of being able to help children successfully if you don't have empathy? That's a really important factor in dealing with any situation, is that perspective taking and understanding how somebody else feels. Teaching children to be aware of emotions, labeling those emotions is really important, and acknowledging and accepting children's emotions. Validating those emotions is huge, and I think everybody can think of a time in life where maybe there wasn't something that you could do to change the outcome of a situation, but you felt better because somebody did evaluate or validate your emotions and understand what you are going through, and that made it feel a little bit better. So that is really, really important, and that also leads back to the listening and being respectful is a part of that too. We want to do some emotional coaching with children, and there are some techniques to that emotional coaching which sets children up for success. And so just, again, to reiterate, building positive, respectful relationships is really where positive guidance is going to start. You need to get down to the children's level and talk to them and listen to them. I don't know why adults in a lot of situations think it's okay to interrupt children when they're speaking. We know that it's not okay to interrupt another adult. It's rude, so why do we think it's okay to interrupt children? We got to give them the time to be able to express what they're feeling. Because sometimes when they're interrupted, they lose that focus, and so what they were wanting to say isn't going to come out, because it's almost like starting from the beginning and rethinking it. As much as we can integrate the discussions about emotions into our curriculum, there's a lot of really good programs that can help with emotions and labeling emotions and using pictures to help children understand emotions. There's a lot of lotto games and books. So as much as you can incorporate those materials is really going to benefit the children, and understanding what those emotions are like as well. And through hands-on learning is really the best. If you can label emotion and they see a picture or hear a sound that's related to emotion, like crying or I'm angry, I'm yelling, those types of things really help children to understand. Acknowledging emotions. So what I said before about just validating, letting the children freely express those emotions without interrupting is going to be really key to making them know it's okay. And I think you're going to be more successful, and children will practice this. Like, these are steps and techniques we're going to use to teach children. What we want them to be able to do in the end is to independently do this on their own without adult guidance. And so by going through these steps, being respectful and teaching them, there's going to be a time where they're going to be successfully just telling somebody how they feel and working through that scenario on their own. Put words to their feelings if they're having these feelings and they're having a hard time expressing it. I can see you're crying. You must be sad, or are you sad? So that gives a name or a label to that feeling for that emotion. As well as mildly appropriate your own expressions of feelings as well. So you're human. Tell children how you're feeling. If, a child in your environment rips a page out of a book, express your emotion and how that makes you feel. Oh, that really made me feel sad when you did that. Now the book is ruined. Now we can't we won't be able to finish the story because that page is gone. So they should know, that you can express emotions and you have emotions too, and can relate that back to them. That does conclude Chapter 2 of guidance. Please do see your instructor if you have any questions regarding Chapter 2, or to check in to ensure that you haven't missed any handouts or assignments to Chapter 2.